All right, so we're on to pretty much one of the last chapters of Pirkei Avot. This is actually the last portion of Pirkei, which is the main portion of Pirkei Avot, the 5 chapters. The additional chapter, which Bezrat Hashem will do as well, is in addition to Pirkei Avot. It was later on added on to Pirkei Avot. Hopefully we'll get to it too. Very important last Mishnayot. Mishnah Chaf, it's actually the 20th Mishnah in this chapter, deals with certain characteristics that are important in life. Important because it is very possible for a Jew to become distracted or to become weakened in his resolve and his dedication towards the mitzvot, for all kinds of reasons. And even though we spoke about certain positive qualities in the past, the qualities of Avraham Avinu versus the qualities or school of thought of Bil'am Harasha, 2 opposing schools of thought, 2 opposing approaches or attitudes toward life, what one should pursue, what one should emphasize or develop. Very, very opposite, right? Avraham is more humble, Avraham is more giving, more generous, not as materialistic, right? He's more spiritual. And Bil'am is the very other end of that. Very much into themselves, egoistic, selfish, materialistic, and so forth. So we spoke about all kinds of positive qualities that one should strive to acquire, that one should emphasize in life. And here we're introduced to a little bit more of an aggressive kind of personality in some ways. A little bit of aggressiveness apparently is needed at times. That's what Yehuda ben Tema Omer. Yehuda ben Tema tells us that even though it's true that one has to have a refined character and personality and adapt the positive virtues, traits of our forefathers, nonetheless, at times, have'az kanamer. You have to be audacious or aggressive, if you want to use that word, as a leopard. At times, when it comes to observance of mitzvot, aggressiveness, assertiveness is perhaps a nicer word, but you need aggressiveness. You need to be strong-minded when it comes to doing the mitzvot. Simply because there are many forces in nature, in life, that can pull us apart, unfortunately, and create distance between the Jew and the mitzvot. One of them is the beautiful midah of busha, of shame. It's beautiful, it's necessary. Am Yisrael is considered Baishanim, Rachmanim, Gomlei Chasadim. We have all 3 traits. Baishanim meaning bashfulness, where there was a certain level or degree of timidity, you may want to call it. And we're compassionate, we're kind-hearted. So busha is something definitely virtuous, something that every Jew should have. However, if a person overdoes it at times, he may fail in observing certain mitzvot only because there may be times or situations where people will make fun of him. And as a result of this busha, he may say, well, I don't want to put myself through shame. Emotionally, psychologically, people have different kinds of pressures, and shame is definitely very powerful. Nobody wants to be embarrassed. So, therefore, for this type of situation, Yehuda ben Tema says, "Ave'az kalamer." You sometimes just have to be audacious, ferocious, aggressive, like a leopard. A leopard is not the strongest animal, but he has azut. He's audacious, and sometimes that midah is necessary. For what? As we will see later on, la'asot retzon avicha shebashamayim. We're not saying to use it all the time. We're saying to use it to comply with the Torah, to fulfill the mitzvot, to do our Father's will, our Father in heaven's will. In that particular situation, it may be necessary. A person who is audacious is less inclined to be impressed by what people will say. Ultimately, people are affected by public opinion, how they are looked upon, and it makes a difference in how they act. So this audacity, this azut, will come in handy that he will be less mitpa'il. He will not relate too much to what people say. I'm talking about the negative criticism, the funny jokes that perhaps they will make of him. He will not be impressed. He will take it very lightly. He will ignore it. So to be able to ignore these kind of jokes, especially when it comes from a lot of people, relatives, close friends, I wouldn't even call them close friends if they make fun of you. But, people who you thought were your friends, people who you're familiar with, people of the same community. It could be very difficult, it could be challenging. So the midah of azut kanamer, like a leopard, can come in very, very handy. Azut, or audacity, is also handy because sometimes a person could be lazy. He may not, be in the mood to do something. He may be a little bit tired. Audacity helps with that too. Audacity can also help, let's say you have to tell somebody that what he's doing is wrong. Again, if someone is mitbayesh, he's embarrassed, then how will he ever get the point across? How will he ever communicate to certain people that he may otherwise have influence? If he's ashamed, he's embarrassed, he doesn't want to be on their bad side. All kinds of excuses or all kinds of reasons that the Yetzirah obviously is planting in this individual, and using his natural midah or characteristic of busha, of shame, it's easy to just let go and not want to be on people's mouth, not to want to be on people's bad side. But in order to accomplish certain things, in order to rebuke people, this particular midah is really necessary. Another example would be, let's say somebody's in class and he's ashamed to ask the rabbi, the teacher, a question. We already learned before, lo habayshan lomed. The one who's embarrassed does not learn. The person who's embarrassed to ask questions, right? He's embarrassed to raise his hand. He's embarrassed to question something, Don't be embarrassed. If you want to learn, you need to ask. You need to find out. You need to verify, confirm, clarify some things. Need clarity, need clarification. So without the azut, sometimes it may be difficult for the student to overcome. There are children who are more bashful than others, and it takes a certain amount of strength, a certain amount of courage, and azut, as it's called over here, to overcome that fear and that shame. What's interesting about the various midot that we're going to learn now, that one can see from various animals, that the rabbis are suggesting that we adopt these characteristics, is that the Gemara actually tells us that if it wouldn't be for the Torah, we would actually observe and learn certain characteristics from certain animals. For example, tzniut min hachatul, the rabbi said, we would learn modesty from a cat. Have you ever seen a cat go to the bathroom? You don't see it so easily, right? It does it privately, quietly. It doesn't want to be seen. A dog has no problem with it. Anywhere. And your grass, just about everywhere. The cat is more tsanua. So when it comes to midat tzniut, when it comes to modesty, which is an important midah, we would be able to pick it up. We would be able to observe it in nature, in cats. And there are other animals too. We would learn gezel, the prohibition of stealing, from the nemala, from the ant. An ant, they're busy bringing seeds, grains. If it drops one, no other ant will touch it and take it for itself. Yeah, they don't touch, they don't take from each other. They work hard for their own. If we would observe nature, we would be able to learn all kinds of ideas, all kinds of concepts, midot, from these various animals. We would learn arayot, the prohibition of arayot, of not going off with some other person's wife, right? Sticking to your own, from pigeons, doves, who are pretty much together forever, right? They don't go sharing like some people do, or take somebody else's, which is unfortunately a problem in society. It always was. People have all kinds of weird ideas. And we're talking about even those who know the halakha, know the isurim, the prohibitions. Nonetheless, because of the Yetzirah, they do all kinds of forbidden things. So here, if we were left to just observe nature, we would learn a lot just by observing these animals. These are characteristics that we would pick up from them. Courage, which in Hebrew is called ometz, is very valuable. Courage is a little bit different than azut. Courage is an inner strength that is needed at certain times of danger and all kinds of other situations. Courage is also very necessary. In the following, I'll give you one example. Let's say mincha is approaching, the time to pray mincha, and you're stuck somewhere in the street. You're in the freeway, you're in a gas station, you're in the public area. I mean, what do? You don't want to wait till you come to a shul. You don't want to wait till you come home. It may be too late by then to pray mincha. You may need to pray mincha in a public place. It may be at the airport, it may be at a gas station, it may be who knows where. It has happened to me, And you just have to be prepared to pray, even though people may stop and look at you. Yeah. And it is very possible for one to be embarrassed and go over to the phone and talk to Hashem on the phone. Make believe that he's talking to someone because he doesn't want to be seen praying. But there's nothing really to be ashamed of it. If you think about it, people will understand he's praying. I mean, a lot of people talk to the wall these days anyway, right? Yeah, so he's talking to someone. Maybe today it's actually easier to understand because people have these phones, in the ear. When it first came out, I was like, who's he talking to? He was walking down the street talking to someone, with something in his ear. But it requires courage. Without the courage, people are ashamed. It's another example of being ashamed to do something which is right. I remember in my early years of travel on TWA, I had to put on tefillin on the airplane. Today they look at it as a threat, maybe. But in those days, a lady came over to me, a Catholic lady, and she says, "No, I respect your religion." She admired that. She, here was somebody doing something in public, because the time has come. The time has come to do it, and didn't ask any questions, just took out the bag and put it on. It's not, of course, the most comfortable place to put on tefillin but if you had no other choice, you're traveling long distances to Israel, if you're on Alal, it's easier. You may have a minyan. But even then, it's not easy. But you have no choice. It's a long distance flight. You don't want to miss a prayer. You don't want to miss put on the tefillin on time. So you got to do it. So it requires a certain amount of ometz, courage. Courage is very, very important because at times that's what will be required in order to fulfill the mitzvah, to get it done. Take someone who has a business and Friday he needs to close because of Shabbat and he closes a little bit early. You may have people looking at him, you're crazy. Why are you closing early? And you're taking off tomorrow too. You're going to lose all this money. So here again, you have a situation that may be embarrassing. It may be a little bit challenging. Money in all kinds of situations. It requires courage. It requires clarity. It requires emunah too. Otherwise, why should somebody do it? So, as kanamer is a situation where if it's going to be done for the fulfillment of a mitzvah, it is welcome, it is necessary. Otherwise, we don't want to be aggressive. In other words, aggressiveness is not one of those characteristics of the Jew. But at times, he is being told to do so, to be so, if he wants to be able to observe a mitzvah. It just may be required of him to be courageous, to be strong. The next one is kal kanesher, swift, agile, as an eagle. Well, what does an eagle tell us? An eagle is able to soar, to go up to great heights. As a result of that, it is able to overcome all kinds of obstacles in the way. Life is full of obstacles that we may need to overcome. In order to overcome these obstacles and challenges, we need to be easygoing about it. We need to be agile. We need to be able to raise ourselves or elevate ourselves above these obstacles, like an eagle does. In other words, to just jump over them, not make a big issue from it. And this happens when a person, of course, a Jew, sees all kinds of obstacles in front of him, before him. He wants to do everything right. He wants to keep Shabbat. He wants to keep kosher, and he sees difficulties. So what? A difficulty in itself, a situation that presents itself as a challenging situation, doesn't mean you should desist, give up. That's it, I'm not going to do it. I see a wall. No. Go around it. Go over it. Be easy. Be light as a nesher. Don't be rigid. A lot of times people's ways or plans are blocked. People's ambitions, people's goals, things don't not work out always the way we want it to go. Be easygoing. So you go around it. Big deal. Lo kara shum davar. Nothing happened. In other words, it could be... It's not could be. It's always a challenge, mishamayim, but it's part of the mazal too. You know, not everybody has it just easy, smooth sailing all the time. So it requires a certain amount of agility, of kal, as it's called in Arabic, hafif. You know, easy, not rigid. People sometimes are very busy in their business, in their jobs. Very, very busy, and as a result of that, they don't see that they can take time off to go to a minyan, to go to a shiur. They're afraid they may lose the money, they may lose a customer if they close a little early. Kal kanesher, be easy, be light like an eagle. Don't look at these challenges as such big barriers that will stand in the way. Even though they're there, you can fly over it. So this is also a beautiful midah, an important characteristic to adopt, to be easygoing, to be light, not to take things too seriously. In a sense, I'm saying that, oh, it's blocking me. You know, I can't do it anymore. I thought I could. I tried, but I couldn't. No, not necessarily. You may still be able to do it. No. So when faced with challenges, doesn't mean that we give up. We need to look for ways to overcome them. One of the nice things that perhaps one can learn from the eagle is that an eagle soars all the way above everything else. You know, man is not an animal. An animal usually looks down to the ground because that's where it comes from. A human being is erect. He stands up. He should be facing up. Most of the time he is, unless he's sleeping, right? So he's supposed to be reminded of his ultimate obligation and commitment to Hashem. This is where he comes from, right? He has a neshama. This is where he's headed back. So don't overemphasize olam hazeh, the physical world, because you're not really that much a part of it. You really belong, at least half of you. The more important part, the essence of the human being, is from there, from above. So think of the eagle as it soars above. This is where you should be heading. This is what you should be aspiring to. So the shamayim, the flight of the eagle, should remind one that be like an eagle. Soar. Then you have the weaklings, I call them. Tipusim chalashim. Weak. They don't put too much effort into anything. They're weaklings. And as a result of this kind of attitude, they tend to not to go often to shul. It's hard for them. You know, and not necessarily, I'm not talking about lazy, no, they're just weak. They're not very, very strong. So it's hard for them to come to Beit Knesset, it's hard for them to do all kinds of things. So for that, Yehuda ben Tema tells us that sometimes you have to be ratz v'ratz katzvi. You have to run, be swift, like a deer that runs quickly, gets away from danger, from the animals of prey that are trying to get it, right? Ratz katzvi. How could that help us to be fast like a deer? We're not necessarily talking about, remember, somebody lazy here. We're talking about somebody who's weak, who's not very resolute, you know, or somebody who has a hard time making up his mind. That's all weakness, not laziness necessarily. So here he's being told, you got to hurry up. Now, I guarantee you, and I think you would agree with me, that if I told anybody who's lazy or slow or weak, there is money being given out outside for free, bundles of cash, just come and grab. Would he run?
Yeah.
Of course. See, why would you run for that and not for a mitzvah? Obviously, it's, people had the wrong perspective of the value of things. That they value for some reason much more than the mitzvot. So obviously we need to adjust their perspective a little bit. So the Tana here, Yudam Tema, is reminding us, listen, all you need to do is just get used to sometimes running, doing things quickly. By doing things quickly, if you get yourself to do things quickly, you'll accomplish. You'll be able to overcome those weaknesses. Like a deer. One way, by the way, to get the individual focused on doing things immediately is also to remember what we've learned before. Shayom katzar v'melacha merubah. Life is short. Before you know it, you turn around, you're in your 70. Yeah, just like that. I always, like to approach people who are in their 70s or 80s. So, you got married, it's just like yesterday, right? Oh, he says, just like, exactly. It went by, and this guy's been married for 40, 50 years. But it's true. Before you know it, it's over. So, life is short. It is very, very short. I mean, we should all have a long life, but it's still short. And the melacha merubah, there's a lot to accomplish. So, if you don't get used to doing things a little bit quickly, we fall behind, chaz v'shalom. So that is the characteristic of a deer. Ratz katzvi, get used to doing things quickly. Sometimes at least you need it more than others. Then you have gibor kari. You need to be strong, courageous, also like a lion. Who's this intended for? This is intended for another type of individual. We call him in Hebrew the pachdan. Pachdan is the one who's fearful, who's scared. He has all kinds of fears, phobias, anxiety. Right? It's not his fault. He is like that, But you can overcome that. There are a lot of things that people can overcome with the proper training. And Yudam Tema is telling us, Gibor Kari. You can be strong like a lion. A lion has tremendous strength, tremendous courage. Even though he's not the biggest animal. Right? He's pretty strong, and he's a fighter, and that's what life is all about. We need to fight sometimes to get ahead, to accomplish certain things. But the point here is that if you do so, you may be successful. You may be, and I'm going to explain why you may be. Maybe not, but you may be. So, without being gibor, it's going to be much more difficult, especially for someone who's afraid. The average individual may not have that problem so much, but sometimes you need to be gibor, even the average individual. Why? Because sometimes a Jew may be faced with life or death for his beliefs, and in order for a Jew to give his life, like our forefathers were able to do, whether it was in the Inquisition or other times in history, where it came from strong belief, conviction, courage, strength. Gibor Kari. They had it, and they were not necessarily the biggest chachamim. We're talking about even the simple people. To be able to do that, to go courageously to one's death, not to give in. No, I'm not going to convert. Where do you take that from? You take that from gvura. You take that from a very inner strength that is the kind of strength that a lion has naturally. So sometimes that's what you need to display. That's what needs to be demonstrated. That's the characteristic that we need to adopt. In other words, from the lion, that courage, that strength. What for? So the key here is that we're using certain characteristics at times, but in a condition that it's to do the will of Hashem. Here's an example of gvura. Today you may not see it as much, but it was quite common, unfortunately, in the late 18th and 19th centuries. In Europe, where certain rabbis had a very difficult time with the reformed communities that would become more reformed. And if the rabbi would say something that the president of the board didn't like, he would be fired. You had rabbis who didn't care about their position. He says, I'm sorry, this is wrong, and I'm going to let you know about it. Whether they did it tactfully or not is a separate story. But they had to put their foot down. They had to say it. They had to rebuke. They had to point out what was wrong. They couldn't just ignore it. That's their responsibilities. And they did it. And many times they were thrown out. There were others who didn't want to be fired, who wanted to keep their job. That was more important to them than saying the truth. Obviously, they were not giborim. They were not arayot. They were not strong. They were not like lions. That's what the Tanai is telling us. Listen, sometimes you just got to be like that. There's no way about it. You know, you have to stand up for your principles and for your values. Yeah, of course, you can do it tactfully. You can do it refinedly. There are ways to do it that hopefully you won't have to shout. You won't have to make a big deal, a big demonstration about it. Hopefully not. But sometimes you got to protest. Sometimes you got to say the truth openly, without shame, without being afraid. How do you do it? Gibor kari. You got to be strong like a lion. All of this we've pointed out is on condition לעשות רצון אביך שבשמיים, that it's to do the will of God. One who does the opposite, in other words, that uses these traits for other things, for personal gain, obviously it's not good. That's why he adds, הוא היה אומר, אז פנים לגיהנום. He adds the same azut that we spoke about that is good, but if you're always like that, and always an aspanim, always chatzuf, always impudent, right? Always poru, yeah? I think that's the better one, yeah? Then aspanim legehenom. A person like that will end up in Gehenom. He doesn't have any kavod for people, right? He doesn't have any respect, right? So as panim, on a regular basis, that midah can take someone to Gehenom. Voshet panim legan eden, person who has shame, who is bashful, whose nature is like that, has a good chance of ending up in Gan Eden. Why? Because busha, of all the midot, is actually one of the more important midot in preparing one to do teshuvah. He's ashamed of himself. That's why he regrets it. He's remorseful. Without busha, how is a person ever going to do teshuvah? So you need the shame. So ultimately, the midah of busha is an aid, and therefore will lead one to Gan Eden, because teshuvah will lead one to Gan Eden. So between the two, obviously you don't want to have azut panim, chutzpah all the time. You don't want to be aggressive type of an individual. If anything, you want to have the busha, because boshet panim, that particular midah, prepares one or helps one do teshuvah, and therefore eventually gain Gan Eden. The end of this Mishnah is very interesting. The end of this Mishnah says like this: Yiratzon milefanecha, Hashem Elokeinu, may be the will of Hashem, our God, shetivne irach b'mirav yaminu, or shetibane bet hamikdash. There's another version, I think, that you should build your city, you should build the Bet HaMikdash very quickly in our days. V'ten chadkenu b'toratecha, make it so that we should have a share in your Torah. So it's a very interesting addition that's put at the end of this Mishnah. So some do say that this was where the Perek ended. This is where Pirkei Avot ended. And this is a good ending for everything that has been said. Talking about the Bet HaMikdash, talking about being rebuilt. But it is possible that the additional Mishnayot were already there, and Yehuda ben Temah just added these words for another reason. There are various explanations given. I'm going to give you what I think is my idea, perhaps, of what the connection here is. Yehuda ben Temah is talking about azut. In the beginning and in the end, he said az kanamer, which is good. And then he says, as panim, the audacity, the chutzpah, at all times is no good. That goes to Genom. Then he says, Yiratzon milefanecha Hashem Elokeinu. He begins to talk about the Bet HaMikdash. He begins to talk about Mashiach, basically. And he adds the words, Techedkenu b'toratecha. It could very possibly be, and this is along the lines more or less of what the commentaries say, but just it's a little bit of, the emphasis that I want to add is a little bit different. The Gemara and the rabbis do tell us that one of the simanim of the generation of Mashiach is chutzpah tizgeh. There will be a lot of chutzpah. I mean, if you look back 100 years ago, a child the kavod that he gave his father, he kissed his hands. I mean, it's incredible. I think in every country it was like that, even in Iran, right? Yeah, they're scared too. Yeah, they gave kavod. They honored father and mother, grandparents. I mean, the older generation was older. People stood up, got up, right? In the generation of Mashiach, no. It says the elderly will get up for the young. A son will talk back to his dad. A daughter will be disrespectful. A daughter-in-law will be disrespectful of her mother-in-law, which was always the case anyway. But it will be more even accentuated in the times of Mashiach. You have a tremendous amount of lack of respect for tradition, for the previous generation. Chutzpah. So this has to do with the generation of Mashiach. So perhaps Yehuda ben Tema is saying, let's hopefully get through that as quickly as possible, because there will be an abundance, too much of this chutzpah in the generation of Mashiach. And as a result of this chutzpah, people will become distant from Torah, distant from tradition, will not be as interested. They will not be respectful of the past, of the past generation. They will not be respectful of Torah or of Talmidei Chachamim, because of that they will be making fun of rabbis, as we see today. So therefore he adds that let us hope that in our days, in our times, that we see and witness the coming of the Mashiach, that the Bet HaMikdash is restored to its former glory, where as a result of all that beauty and splendor and the coming of Mashiach and the reign of the Mashiach and the revelation of Hashem, obviously all the chutzpah, all that chutzpah that has existed will disappear, not only amongst the Jews, but from the world, the evil, because evil basically breeds that kind of, or foments that kind of attitude of chutzpah and azut panim. And B'ezrat Hashem, as a result of being able to do away with all the tumah, all the impurities and all the chutzpah, B'ezrat Hashem, more and more people will be able to have a share in the Torah. There will be more and more baalei teshuvah. So we should be able to see through all the darkness that is around today, and nevertheless, despite all the challenges, we should have the merit to have a share in the Torah. So I think that's pretty much maybe the connection of those words with what he was saying before. Okay, so let's go on to the last two Mishnayot. The last two? Actually, last three. Okay, last three Mishnayot. These are easy, but very fascinating. Hu haya omer, we'll continue with Yehuda ben Tema. Ben 5 shanim lamikra. Life has stages. When a child is 5 years old, he should learn Chumash. He's capable of understanding Chumash. That's what you should do. No Gemara. Ben 10 la Mishnah. Ben 10 he can handle Mishnah, he can handle Halachot. So before we go on to the rest of the stages in life, what is the Tanakh telling us? He's telling us that ideally, kol davar be'ito ma tov. If you can do things in the right time, it's much better. If a child can be introduced to certain things at a certain stage, fine. In other words, you don't want to get him started on something too complicated early. You don't want to wait and push it off till later on either. You don't want to waste his youth playing with toys. You want to start him up with the right things at the right time. But everything according to a seder, everything according to a certain order. What's unusual, however, about this seder is that we don't see this too much today being followed. People are learning Gemara a little earlier than usual. People are not learning as much Chumash or Tanakh, early on as they should. And because of that, not every Jew, unfortunately, is proficient in the various areas of Torah, as they used to be in the past. But obviously this did not just happen by chance. Part of it is because of the galut that we're in. In many areas we were forced to go to high school and learn and study secular studies as well. Where at one time a Jew was not so much exposed to secular studies. So there's less time for learning. Before you know it, one is getting married. Before you know it, he's beginning to work. When is he going to embrace? When is he going to be able to grasp and learn the Gemara, the Mishnah, which is the meat of halacha and the source of much of our knowledge that we have today, the body of knowledge that we have. So yeshivot emerged where emphasis was put on preparing children to learn the basics of Mishnah and Gemara, at the expense a little bit, unfortunately, of Chumash, but with the hope that by giving them the tools on how to learn, later on they will be able to learn on their own and continue to learn. Unfortunately, I say unfortunately, because unfortunately it just didn't happen always. People do not always sit down to learn as much as they should, and they're very limited in what they know as far as their vast ocean of Torah that exists is vast. And we only live so many years, and people know much less than they could really know, potentially. So, what do you do, about this problem? There have been some schools who have introduced more of Chumash, more of Halakha because of this, to try to adjust the areas that were lacking. Ultimately, it's really up to the individual. That's what it comes down to. Much more than changing the school systems, the individual has to realize that depending on his area that he's drawn to, as the Rabbi tells in the Gemara, to the area that you're drawn, that's where you should specialize. That's what you should. In other words, you want to know Gemara, you want to learn Halakha, you want to have the basics of Chumash, know our history and the mitzvot. But after a while, wherever you are drawn to, that's where your neshama really has come down for, and that's where you should specialize and spend more time. But not on account of halakha. You still have to learn halakha. Halakha has to be reviewed, as opposed to what? As opposed to running to Kabbalah. Kabbalah, for those who are really pulled to it, is beautiful and very important. And really, really good. For those neshamot that really appreciate it. But even for them, it's on condition that they have a foundation. We all need to have a foundation of Chumash and Halakha, basics of Gemara, Mishnayot. The question is emphasis. Emphasis will come with time. A person has to develop a thirst for Torah. A Jew has to develop a thirst for Torah. He has to be consistent in his learning. He has to be kove'aitim, day and night, every day of the week. By doing so with the proper chavruta, in other words, a partner in learning, a proper shiur, or with teachers and rabbis, he may be able to find an arrangement or a schedule that fits him, fits his schedule, and fits his inclination of what he wants to learn, which areas he wants to learn. Because the facts are, the reality is that we cannot get too much from the school system these days. It's just, the world has changed very, very much. So even though improvement is needed in those schools as well, to get the child more motivated, to get the child more involved, and perhaps to make him more knowledgeable about certain areas, yes, improvements are needed. However, in the end, it's ultimately going to depend on the husband and wife, as a couple, of course, on how much Torah they value and what they do about it, and how they pursue it, and how they further enrich their knowledge in Torah. Today, Baruch Hashem, we have a lot of books. There's a lot of courses, shiurim on CD and the internet. And obviously, when I say the internet, you have to be careful with proper filters. It could be a vehicle for tremendous enrichment and learning, and we should take advantage of it. So that's why he begins with order. Order is important, everything done at the proper stage. That is the way the child can accomplish the most. When it comes to 13, what happens at the age of 13? Somehow the child is ready to put on tefillin. He becomes bar mitzvah. Why not at 12? Why not at 9? Why not 15? What's 30? What's the magic number 13? The rabbis tell us that it has been seen, and that they know this by tradition, that 13 is an age of maturity. Both physically, the child is more developed, mentally, he's more developed, and therefore at this junction in his life, he can assume responsibilities, certain responsibilities. He's able to distinguish right from wrong, therefore he can accept the yoke or the burden of the mitzvot, which is what bar mitzvah is all about. So that's why 13 is a time of responsibilities, the time for mitzvot. Ben 15 la Talmud, at 15, of course, you have the learning, Talmud, The mind is more developed. He's more analytical. He can handle that at 15. As we said earlier, Gemara started before a little bit, but even if it started earlier, the older you get, the more analytical the mind becomes and the more it could grasp. Ben 18 lachupa. Guess what? I have some news to tell you. At 18, you're supposed to get married. 18. So what happened? 18. And some people got married at 13, 14. I'm sure in Iran you heard of this too. Women also, but even men. Huh?
9, 10 years.
Well, that was unusual. It's not supposed to be like that. But because of the problems they had, with some sheikhs wanting for themselves, the Jewish girls, the mullahs, right? Mm-hmm. So they had to do it. Oh, she's already taken. Oh, she's taken. Oh, I didn't know. Okay. And I think then they would leave her alone. But if she was not taken, they would take her. 18. What's so special about 18? Well, obviously, rabbis felt that at 18, the child has reached a point in his life, the boy or girl, where they are mature enough, not just for mitzvot, but to embark on the next step in life, which is to form their own family. That's a certain stage of maturity. In Israel, means you can carry a gun. You can be there. You're in the army. You can drive a little earlier than that, but still, it's definitely developed. Not for everyone, however. Obviously, some people develop a little later, mature later, but 18, even though 18 perhaps then was much more than it is today, but still, it's still an age where one should get ready at least. The reason I say get ready is because not everybody ends up getting married at 18, but at least one should get ready, one should want it, one should look for it. If it presents itself, one should grab it. What can we do? Sometimes it just doesn't present itself. That's because zivugim min hashamayim. Marriage is in the hands of heaven. So what can we do? But not to push it off indefinitely and unnecessarily. Oh, I want to go to college. I want to go at least 8 years to become a doctor. Who says your soulmate is going to wait for you? So people who are picky, people who are just pushing it off for no real good reason, are taking a chance of losing chas v'shalom, the soulmate. Unless the person is a good person, that Hashem says, don't worry. I'll find her for you. I'll ask her to wait for you, or whatever. In this generation, a lot of people are getting married later because a lot of people are balei tshuva. So Hashem says, listen, you're a bal tshuva, then you have to wait for your soulmate to become a balat tshuva. She may not be ready yet. As soon as she is, I'll bring the two of you together. Very important to remember that despite our efforts, a lot of prayer needs to be done, because there's a lot of, unfortunately, accusations. There's tikkunim, all kinds of atonements that people have to go through, and because of that there are delays. But chas v'shalom, for a person to be picky or to push it off for no reason whatsoever, as I may have told you a story a long time ago where somebody came to the stipend when he was 28 already. He says, Rabbi, where's my zivug? He's 28. He says, you met her when you were 21. But you probably were looking for money. He told him straight out, and it was true. I mean, this rabbi was a big rabbi. He didn't just say things and say, you may have met her already, but you were looking for money. Oh, she doesn't have money. I don't want her. That could be a problem. So Rabbi said, listen, Meshmonayse lachupa, as soon as it becomes possible, at least get ready. If something, it has to present itself, of course. Hashem has to agree. But if Hashem wants it and you don't want it, what's going to happen? So, there's a lot of benefits and advantages of getting married young. People are not set in their ways. Once you're 58, imagine somebody 58. You can still, by the way, get married and have children. I know people like that. I know people who got married after 60. But it's harder if he's a very tough guy, because he got set in the way. When you're getting married when you're younger, you're growing together. I mean, I know people that got married young and they're still stubborn, but it's easier when you're young to grow together than when you're settled down. You got used to living as a single person for 60 years. Now he's going to have to give in. Well, who is she? What is she going to tell me what to do? Yeah, but she's your partner. They don't, it's hard. And we're not talking even about the Yetzer Hara here. The Yetzer Hara is a big problem for people who are single. Big, powerful problem. Powerful. How do you avoid that unless you're learning Torah? If you're learning Torah, you may be able to, maybe, I say maybe, to stay calm. But without Torah, without a wife, without a husband, same thing for a woman, for men, it's difficult, very, very difficult. What about loneliness? So the Chachamim very much encourage the earlier, the better. 20, what comes at 20? Ben Ezim Lirdof. Now comes time to work. As opposed to what? As opposed to food stamps. These people are not working. That's why I say food stamps. Torah is against it. You can work, you have brains, you're physically fit, you're not in a wheelchair, go work, contribute to society somehow. What about all those who are learning Torah for many years? There are some exceptional individuals who should be learning Torah because we need leaders, we need Torah leaders. They should be encouraged to continue to learn Torah, at least for a while. So they should become stronger in Torah. But the average person, after of course learning a number of years Torah, needs to contribute somewhat, somehow, to society. Somehow, as a teacher, doesn't have to be a plumber, doesn't have to be a carpenter, doesn't have to be a shoemaker. It could be a sofer, mohel, a scribe, right? Shochet, all kinds of ways, services that are beneficial to the community. So ben esrim lirdof, as soon as you reach the age of 20, get ready lirdof, to pursue what? To pursue a career, to begin to work. You're young, you have energy, that's the time to do it. So there's no way out, there's no two ways about it. The rabbis are against loafing, I think that's the word, and just, sticking around and doing nothing. Contribute. Ben shloshim lakoach. At 30, that is the height of our strength and energy. Rabbis tell us 30, 18 is physically, you grew, you stopped growing. 30 is pretty much the height, approximately, of our strengths and stamina. So therefore, accomplish as much as you can and work till 30, because after that, you're going to slow down, little by little. And that's okay. Slow down, because eventually you have to put time away for learning too, for doing mitzvot, not just work. But shloshim is the height of koach, of physical strength. Ben arba'im labina, at 40, now you're supposed to have bina. Bina means understanding. In other words, there's a certain mental maturity. We talked about physical maturity, we talked about stamina, strength, now we talk about the mind. So at 40, you've reached the point where your mind settles. It's called yishuv hadat. It calms down, it settles, you've done most of your work. Hopefully you've made some money. Hopefully you basically built up your home, your nest. And now the mind has settled. It's not rushing, it's not, that much in a rush to do things as in the past. The whole nature, the whole metabolism is slowing down. So there's bina. Bina, at that point, the mind is able to grasp things a little bit better, know things a lot better. And therefore, this is a time to learn things that you may not have had time to learn till now. That is what the rabbis tell us, at 40, Kabbalah is better than 20. Because at 40, hopefully by then you would have learned all the other things that there are to learn. Plus their age and maturity, that is the mind is settled. Now you can learn Kabbalah. So a lot of people did not learn Kabbalah until they were about 40 because of that. The mind has to be settled to be able to focus on that which is abstract, that which requires a purer and cleaner mind too. And a mind that's not so distracted by work and raising small kids and changing diapers. So 40 is bina. 40 is a time where the mind is able to settle and understand things better and grasp them better than before. Ben chamishim la'etzah, at 50, you can give advice, because what happens at 50, hopefully, not everyone, but hopefully at 50, you will have both experience and knowledge, so you can give advice. 50, you can tell your youngster, I went through this, don't do this. That's me, I know all about it. You have experience. Hopefully it's the good experience, it's the right experience. So if a person has the proper right experience, plus he's knowledgeable, he gained knowledge, he has binah, at 50, 50 la'etzah, he can give others advice. Ben Shishim, 60. We're getting there soon, huh? Ben Shishim la zikna. You've reached old age. Some people never got to 60. There are certain times in history that if you were 50, 53, 54, you were an old man already. That's it. There were all kinds of diseases. Hashem yishmor. Ben Shishim la zikna. So when you reach 60, rabbis looked at 60 as zikna. That's the stage where life has reached the pinnacle of what it's called the elderly years. You're zaken now. You're not young anymore. Therefore what? Therefore, since you are zaken, stay away and minimize the ta'avot, the physical desires, the materialism. You don't need it as much as you needed it before. You don't need to eat as much. You don't need to sleep as much. And since you're a zaken, focus on your end. Time is running out, right? Learn a little bit more, spend more time with your family. I mean, all kinds of things, That is why people retire sometime then in the 60s, because that's it. I mean, life is not only about work. So less physical energy too. So at this point in life, contemplate the end. Begin to minimize, therefore, the ta'avot, desires. Ben shiv'im la seva, 70 is seva. What's seva? What's the difference between 60 and 70? The Torah says, "Mipnei seva takum." You get up before those who are the elderly. And the Torah uses the word seva. Seva is full of. In other words, an old man who has had a full life. Why is that full life? Because David HaMelech says, "Yemei shenotenu bahem shivim shana." The average lifespan of a person, pretty much, give or take, is 70 years. Even though today it's a little longer, average, depending on the country. Why is that a complete life? Just because the number is 7? No, because at that point you would have had children, hopefully grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Beautiful. Seva, complete, full. Then what? Well, after that, if a person lives longer, it's called arichut yamim. Hashem is lengthening his life. If it's less than that, of course, it's not as long, but it's a very significant stage in life where the Zohar says, Mipnei seva takum, which we just said literally means get up for somebody that age. It also means something else. The Zohar says you can interpret that verse to mean like this: Mipnei seva, before you become a seva, takum b'tshuva, get up and do teshuvah. Right? Because even the word seva means lashuv, like it's the same letters to return to do teshuvah. If a person does teshuvah later on in his 80s or 90s, if he's still alive, it's not the same, because he doesn't have as much of a yetzer hara. Before you become a seva, that's the trick. When you still have the challenges, you still have the temptations and the yetzer hara, before you get to that point, takum do teshuvah. So that was 70. What happens at 80 if the person is still around? Ben shmonim ligvura, strength. What strength? I thought the strength was done with. We said 30, he was strong. After that, he was losing it. Here we're talking about a different kind of strength. We're talking about strength over the yetzer hara. Obviously, a person who's gotten to 80, we say that Baruch Hashem, it definitely is a gift mishamayim. So you can say that Hashem has given them extra strength. You can say that too. But otherwise, it does mean that a person has, at that point, much more spiritual strength than physical strength. He's able, therefore, to do battle with the yetzer hara much more easily. Therefore, he should remember that. Now you have much more spiritual strength than you have physical strength. So therefore, spend more time if you can. If a person is healthy, alevai, we should get to that age and be healthy. Spend more time learning Torah. All right, next, Ben Tish'im. You see, we're going for the Guinness Book World of Records. Ben Tish'im Lasuach. At 90, Lasuach means people begin to bend down. Yeah, that's just natural. Nature takes its course. People are no longer as independent. They may need the help of others, a care lady, whatever. old age home. Lasuach, it's already, people are just not the same. They've lost a tremendous amount of strength. But why is he telling this to us? The reason why the Tanai is laying this out, even year by year, stage by stage, even the elder years, because he's telling us that even at the later years, a person can still do teshuvah as long as his eyes are open, his ears are Baruch Hashem function. I mean, he can do. As long as he's walking, as long as he's breathing. And Tish'im is already lasuach. But why tell us lasuach? Because lasuach is reminding him when he's bending down, the kever is there. So if you didn't think about teshuvah till then, now you're lasuach. You still are able to do what? You still are able to do lasuach. What's lasuach? Besides bending, lasuach also means to pray. You can't learn a lot. You lost your vision. You lost your hearing. You can still pray. There's a lot of things a person can still do even if he's 90. Ben me'ah, kilomet v'avaru batem min ha'olam. If he's 100, what then?
Buy diapers.
Huh?
Diapers.
Somebody told me that his great-grandmother at 100, or grandmother, all of a sudden she began to get new teeth.
Wow.
A new set of teeth.
Wow.
She lost the first set. It's like a new life.
Amazing.
He says, Ben me'ah, and they have people, of course, who go beyond 100. It's like ilumet v'avaru batem min ha'olam. It's like he's gone. It's like he's dead. It's like he's no longer existent. Now, why does he have to tell us this? Even if he's 100, he can still do teshuvah. It's ki'ilu met. He's not met. It's ki'ilu. It's almost like you're gone. But the fact that you're alive, that means Hashem still wants you here. And what that tells us is that every moment is precious. Every, therefore, moment that a person still has is from Shamayim. Therefore, even if a person is in the hospital, they shouldn't disconnect him from the tubes. Hashem wants him to be there. Every moment has a reason for it. And of course, if he's cognizant and aware, not in a coma, he can still say the vidui, he can still do the teshuvah, he can still talk and communicate and give instructions perhaps. So this is still a time given to him for Shamayim, for reflection, for accomplishing whatever he could do at that time. Therefore, one should do as much as he can. The elder years simply remind us that time is running out. It doesn't mean that it's up yet, but it's running out. And therefore, since it's running out, refocus your priorities, refocus your time, how you manage your time. Learn more and more Torah. That's why he's laying it out in detail. Every moment is special. Finally, we have the last two Mishnayot, small Mishnayot, Ben Bagbag and Ben Heihei. Ben Bagbag, some say they were converts. Ben Bagbag omer hafoch ba v'hafoch ba lekula be. When you learn Torah, learn it as much as you can, review it as much as you can, turn it over, because the more you learn it, the more you will see beautiful insights. You will see that all the knowledge and wisdom in the world is there. The kula be. The Chazon Ish was once asked by somebody who needed to go through surgery. Which doctor to go, how to go about it. He tells, well, I'm going to draw you a drawing. Tell the surgeon to cut here and to cut here and not to cut there. The surgeon says, how does this guy know this? From the Torah. He was able to figure out where is the best place to make surgery from. Then he says, after the surgery, go to America and make sure you go by plane and not by boat. When he finally arrived in America, the first question the surgeon there asked him, how did you get here? He says, by plane. Thank goodness. Had you gotten here by boat, you wouldn't have made it. With what you are, with the symptoms that you have, with the boat going up and down in the seas, you wouldn't have made it. The tumor, whatever he had. The rabbi knew what he was talking about. All the rabbis, through other generations, they had tremendous insights and knowledge. From where? From the Torah. And that is what Ben Bagbag is saying. The more you learn, the more you will see it. The kulama, everything is there. All the chokhmot are there, and today we see secrets through computers that they're able to figure out things that are encoded, embedded in the Torah through computers. One is able to see that all the sciences, if you just look, all the wisdom is there. Ubat hazeh, therefore spend more time in it. Spend more time in Torah than in other things. Why should you go to other things? One rabbi was asked, can I learn Greek philosophy? He says, yeah, if you find me a time that's not day or night. He says, now, there are people that needed to know certain things and needed to learn certain things because they dealt with it. That's different. But I can't tell you that certain things are permissible to learn in the bathroom. Because Torah you can't read there. Right? So if you want to practice your Farsi, right, take a dictionary for whatever reason, yeah, do it there. Yeah. A lot can be accomplished. And you spend 15 minutes or 20 minutes a day there, yeah, you'd be surprised. Yeah. But don't read the newspapers. That's a complete waste of time. That should stay in the bathroom. So, Bat Hazeh, focus in it. Focus on Torah. That's what you should spend most of the time. That's what you should. People read novels. Why read a novel? A novel is fake. There's so much real stuff, so much real story, so much true history, Jewish history especially. Torah, Tehillim. Why read a fantasy of an author? It doesn't make any sense to me. Unless, of course, there's something to learn from it. But otherwise, Uvat Tehezeh, this is where you should spend most of the time learning and looking at. V'siv uvleva, this is, you should grow old with it. You should grow gray with it. Uvleva, in other words, you should become aged with it. In other words, there's no pensia, there's no retirement from Torah. Even in your later age, even in your older years, v'siv uvleva. It's all being said in Aramaic because that's the language that they spoke. Grow old with it. Don't let go of it. Don't let go of this and go take something else. Oh, now I'm 65. I want to go back to school and learn something else. Chaval. Unless you need it. People need a trade. It's something else. But if you don't need it, how could you replace this with something else? Nothing compares to it. That's what he says. She'en lecha midat tova hemena. Nothing compares with Torah. So how could a person exchange this for something else? Again, unless there's a need for it. He's a doctor, he's his profession, he's specializing, he's trying to learn something because he will use it, he will benefit people with it. That's different. But just out of curiosity, just to know something, you have to be very, very careful. I do learn all kinds of things. I read about all kinds of things. But that is with the intent of gaining clarity on other subjects that I need to know so that I can talk about it, I can teach about. So that's different. There is a goal to this. And it's a pure goal. But other than that, just to learn and to know things, people memorize actors, their names. What for? What are you going to do with it? I'll give you an example, right? Or just learning or seeing TV, Unless it's a documentary or something, all of that is a waste of time. And he tells us, Minna lo tazua, don't let go of it ever. You won't find anything that can compare with it. Nothing can compare with Torah in value. Why can't anything compare with the Torah? Because what's interesting about Torah is, as we will see it in the next Mishnah, in the last Mishnah, is that for the Torah, you get credit even if you didn't understand it. If you were taking a course in college and you didn't understand a word the professor said, are you going to pass? No. You're going to get a grade? No. Yeah, grade, yeah, an F maybe. But yeah. Torah, even if you didn't understand the Zohar, you learned it, you tried your best, you're going to get reward for that. So we see that there's nothing better than the Torah. Torah obviously has to be learned as much as possible to one's abilities, not just superficially, not just the thinking of the Torah as just, this is just stories. There's a lot of depth to it. And one will discover that there's a lot of depth the more he learns. It's incredible. And every single time you learn the same thing, you discover new insights, new details that you weren't aware of. And finally, the Torah acts as eyeglasses, spectacles. As one rabbi once said, with it, when we learn it, we're able to see what the tachlit, what the purpose of man is in this world. What is his journey all about? Why are we here? Why God created the world? Through the Torah, we're able to understand so much. So how could the person be without Torah, especially the Jew? Right? It's part of our heritage, and it's our map. It's our life. And therefore, without it, we're lost. So much to gain. A Jew who learns Torah has so much to gain. It clarifies so much for him. It guides him in life. It gives him confidence. It gladdens his heart. It gives him the strength to fight the Yetzirah. There's so many things gained from learning Torah. And the last statement here is Ben Heihe. Ben Heihe omer lefum tzara, very important statement to finish the main portion of Pirkei Avot. Very important statement telling us that in the end, a lot of people work hard, a lot of people fulfill mitzvot, work on themselves perhaps, on their midot. In the end, Hashem judges a person not necessarily by what he accomplished, but on how much work went into accomplishing. For some people it came easier. Some people grew up with religion. Some people became Baalei Teshuvah. For some people it became harder. Some people had to walk a mile to the shul. Some people it was just across the street. In Judaism, a lot depends on how much effort was applied. Lefum tsa'ara agra. According to the effort invested, that's how much one will be rewarded. For 2 mitzvot, 2 people doing the same mitzvah, one did it better than the other, one put more effort, one did more, one worked harder, one went through struggles to get to it, he will be rewarded more. The 2 mitzvot are the same, but they're not the same. It all depends on how much was invested. That is why this is pretty much the foundation of why Baalei Teshuvah are on a higher level than regular tzaddikim, who didn't have all the challenges that they did. Imagine letting go this way of life and becoming a full-fledged Jew, observant Jew, and going through all kinds of challenges and difficulties. The Ari, however, says that the generation of Mashiach, even though they will be weaker than the past generations, they will be rewarded much more for every mitzvah that they do, much more than the previous generations. Why? Because to perform the same mitzvah now than 200 years ago, today is much harder. How many people don't put on tzitzit, unfortunately, today? It's so easy, but they don't. Because it's harder for people to just, tzitzit. Any mitzvah is harder. Years ago, you lived in a Jewish ghetto in the Mahaleh, right? Yeah, it was easier, right? But go out and try to live in Qazvin, right? Yeah. Or anywhere. Or even in Mashhad during the days that there was persecutions, right? It was difficult. It was difficult. And if a person nevertheless does mitzvot in that kind of circumstances, kol hakavod, as we say in Hebrew. So the Ari says their reward will be greater. So we're living in a generation of Mashiach where everything is much more difficult. Emunah is more difficult. If you still stay strong, you will be rewarded immensely. So this is basically a very important idea, and it's a beautiful way of finishing the main body of Pirkei Avot. And that is that the main thing is the effort. As the Chafetz Chaim used to say in Yiddish, "Medaf nicht ofton, medaf ton." It's not about achieving, it's about doing. People say, I want to achieve. I want to be successful. He says, that's not up to you. That's up to Hashem if you're going to be successful or not. It's up to you to try. You have to do whatever you can. We don't know how much we're capable of doing. You have to try. Bezat Hashem, we should have the siyata d'shmaya. We should have the divine assistance of Bezat Hashem. He should give us the beracha and the strength, the insight, the clarity, and the confidence, Bezat Hashem, to accomplish as much as possible for His name. Bezat Hashem.
Amen.